What happens when one of Hollywood's most legendary actors walks into what's supposed to be a normal interview and ends up in one of the most uncomfortable moments in daytime television history? When Samuel L. Jackson stepped onto the set of the Tamron Hall show, no one could have predicted just how far things would spiral. What began as a routine promotional chat turned into a raw, heated confrontation that left the audience stunned, the crew scrambling and the internet buzzing for days. Before we dive into how it all went down, make sure you hit that subscribe button and tell us in the comments, whose side are you on after hearing what really happened here? So let's set the scene. The studio lights were bright, the audience was energized, and the atmosphere was pure excitement. Tamron Hall, ever composed and charismatic, welcomed Samuel to the stage with that familiar warm smile. The crowd erupted in applause as the Hollywood icon strolled out, his trademark confidence radiating through every step. He flashed a grin, gave a quick wave, and settled into the chair across from her. Everything seemed perfectly normal. Tamron started with soft questions, his career longevity, the secret to staying relevant, and a few light-hearted anecdotes from his decades in the industry. Jackson answered with charm, wit, and that signature edge that made him one of the most beloved actors of his generation. The audience laughed at his jokes, clapped at his honesty, and the conversation flowed easily. But then, as it always does on live TV, the tone shifted. Tamron brought up something Jackson had said recently in another interview, a comment about the state of Hollywood and how studios today seem to prioritize profits over storytelling. It wasn't controversial when he said it. In fact, many actors had voiced similar frustrations. But Tamron decided to take it one step further. She leaned forward slightly, her tone still polite but probing. "Samuel," she asked, "you've criticized Hollywood for focusing too much on profits. But looking at your filmography, you've been part of some of the biggest blockbuster franchises ever made. Do you think your own career reflects that same system you're criticizing?" The energy in the room shifted instantly. Jackson's easy smile faltered just a bit. His posture straightened. He looked at her with that piercing gaze that could stop anyone mid-sentence. "Well, Tamron," he said slowly, "there's a difference between being part of good commercial projects and selling out completely. I've always chosen roles that interest me. Just because something makes money doesn't mean it's devoid of artistic value." Tamron nodded, but she wasn't done. "I get that," she replied. "But you've done how many Marvel films now? At what point does it stop being about the art and start being about the paycheck?" The audience went completely silent. Jackson's expression hardened. He leaned forward. "That's a pretty reductive way to look at it," he said. "Those Marvel films employ thousands of people. They inspire millions. And yes, they make money. But that doesn't mean I'm phoning it in. I bring everything I've got to every role I play." Tamron didn't back down. "I'm not saying you don't bring talent," she said. "I'm just asking if there's a contradiction between criticizing commercialism and being part of it." "It's a fair question." Jackson let out a short laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Fair?" he repeated. "You want to talk about fair? Let me ask you something, Tamron. How many hard-hitting, investigative stories have you done this month versus celebrity fluff pieces? You sit here in your nice studio interviewing entertainers, and that's fine, but don't act like you're not part of the same system you're trying to critique through me." Gasps echoed through the audience. Tamron blinked, clearly taken aback, but she recovered fast. "Samuel," she said firmly, "I think we're getting off track. I'm not the one being interviewed. We're here to talk about your work." But Jackson wasn't letting go. "No," he said sharply. "We're here so you can get ratings by trying to make me look like a hypocrite. That's what this really is, isn't it? You butter me up with a few easy questions and then go for the gotcha moment." The tension was palpable. Even the crew had gone still. "Samuel," Tamron said evenly, "that's not what this is. I have tremendous respect for your work. I'm asking questions people genuinely want answered." Jackson leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. "A conversation?" he said. "This isn't a conversation. It's an interrogation. There's a difference." Tamron's composure began to crack. "I'm not interrogating you," she said, her tone tightening. "If you think the question's unfair, we can move on." But Jackson wasn't done. His voice rose. "Now you want to talk about what I came here to promote after you've already tried to tear me down? That's rich." "Samuel," she said, her voice firmer now. You're being disrespectful. I asked you a question about your own words. If that feels like an attack, maybe you need to ask yourself why. The audience collectively held its breath. Jackson stood up slowly. You know what? He said. You're right. Maybe I shouldn't be doing interviews anymore. Maybe I shouldn't have come here at all. Tamron stood too. Sit down, Samuel, she said. We're in the middle of a taping. He laughed, a cold, humorless sound. I'm not one of your staff members, Tamron. You don't tell me what to do. I came here as a guest and I'm leaving as one. Not if you're going to be disrespectful, she shot back. You've attacked me, my show, and my integrity, all because I asked one question. Jackson's voice thundered across the set. You made it personal when you questioned my integrity. You think I've been working in this industry for decades just to sell out? I've been building this career since before you knew what a camera was. Tamron's cheeks flushed red. That's out of line, she said. You're deflecting because you don't want to answer the question. Jackson pointed directly at her. You think your show is above the system? Please. You're playing the same game as everyone else. Samuel, Tamron said, struggling to keep her tone even. We have an audience here. Camera's rolling. Let's bring this back to a professional level. He took a deep breath, but his anger was still visible. You want professional? He said. Professionally speaking, this is one of the worst interviews I've ever done. You came in with an agenda. You tried to execute it. Now that I'm calling you out, you want to act like I'm the problem. I didn't come in with an agenda, she said, her voice rising to match his. I came in with questions. Relevant questions. If you can't see the difference, that's not my fault. Jackson gestured toward the cameras. You want viral moments, Tamron. You want headlines? Well, congratulations. You've got one. Tamron crossed her arms. People will talk about this, she said. They'll talk about how one of Hollywood's biggest stars couldn't handle a single tough question. Jackson's eyes narrowed. You call this a tough question? You're trying to box me in, twist my words. That's not journalism. It's manipulation. Tamron snapped. Do not call me manipulative. I built my career on integrity. Asking hard questions isn't manipulation, it's my job. Jackson stepped closer to her desk. And standing up for myself is mine. The room was electric with tension. You could almost hear the sound of every heart beating. Tamron tried to steady herself. Samuel, you're turning this into something it doesn't have to be. I never called you a hypocrite. He cut her off. You didn't have to say it, you implied it. You set up the question so I couldn't win. Either I defend myself and look defensive, or I brush it off and look arrogant. That's the trap. There is no trap, Tamron said, her tone sharp but trembling slightly. This is a conversation that went sideways because you can't handle self-reflection. The audience gasped again. Jackson's face hardened. Self-reflection? You don't know the first thing about me. You think because you sit behind that desk you can psychoanalyze me on live TV? My lane, Tamron fired back, is asking questions. And your lane is answering them. But instead you're attacking me in this show. This show, Jackson said coldly, is just another cog in the machine. You bait guests, you get your sound bites, and you move on. I'm not playing that game. This isn't a game, Tamron said, her voice rising. You're the one making it personal. Jackson laughed bitterly. Personal? You questioned my integrity, my craft, my choices. You made it personal the second you opened your mouth. Tamron leaned over her desk. You're twisting my words. I asked about your comments, something you said publicly. That's fair game. There's a difference between fair and disrespectful, Jackson said. You crossed that line. I have been nothing but respectful, Tamron shot back. From the moment you walked out here, I've shown you grace. The fact that you can't see that, that's not on me. Jackson's voice dropped low. Respect means you don't take cheap shots disguised as questions. Maybe that's something you need to learn. Tamron's expression turned to steel. I never called you a sellout, Samuel. I never accused you of anything. I asked if you saw a contradiction. The fact that you heard that as an accusation says more about you than about me. Yes, Emma said softly, squeezing Lily's hand gently. You knew exactly what you were doing. You're too smart to play dumb now. You wanted a reaction and you got one. Tamron took a slow breath, her voice trembling but firm. I didn't want a reaction. I wanted honesty. But instead I got hostility. Jackson stepped closer again, his presence filling the space. Crew members began to edge forward nervously. Maybe other guests are fine letting you control the narrative, he said. But I'm not built that way. I say what I mean. That doesn't make you authentic, Tamron said. It makes you defensive. If you're so confident in your choices, why does one question rattle you this much? Because it's not one question, Jackson thundered. It's the way you asked it. The tone, the setup. You wanted to create a moment. Congratulations, you got one. Tamron pointed toward the cameras. You keep saying I wanted a moment, but look at you. You're standing yelling, turning this into a spectacle. I'm still trying to have a conversation. Jackson laughed darkly. A conversation ended when you decided my answers weren't good enough. You pushed, you prodded, and now you want to act like you're the reasonable one? That's gaslighting. The word hung heavy in the air. The audience collectively gasped. Tamron's face went pale, then flushed. Do not accuse me of gaslighting, she said through clenched teeth. That's a serious accusation, and it's completely false. Jackson spread his arms. False? You invited me here, attacked my integrity, and now you're acting like I'm the villain. Classic. Tamron's voice shook. I didn't attack your integrity, Samuel. You've attacked mine repeatedly. You've called me unprofessional and manipulative, and for what? Because I asked you one question you didn't like? Jackson's voice softened, but his words were sharp. It wasn't the question. It was everything behind it. The assumption that I owe you an explanation for how I've built my life. I don't owe that to you or anyone. Tamron's voice cracked just slightly. You're right. You don't owe me anything. But I don't owe you a platform to disrespect me or my show. This is my house, Samuel. And in my house, we treat each other with respect. Jackson looked around the studio, then back at her. Your house? He said quietly. Fine, then I'm leaving your house. Because clearly we have very different definitions of respect. Tamron straightened her back. If you walk off this set right now, she said, everyone will see what really happened. They'll see that you couldn't handle one tough interview. Is that the legacy you want? Jackson turned toward her fully. My legacy, he said, his voice steady now, was built long before I ever sat in this chair, and it'll outlast this moment. What people will see is a man who stood up for himself when someone tried to tear him down. I can live with that. Tamron's eyes glistened, a mix of anger and disbelief. You are so convinced I'm the enemy, she said softly. Jackson paused at the edge of the stage, his hand on the mic clipped to his collar. He looked back one last time and said, I'm not convinced you're the enemy, Tamron. I'm just reminded that sometimes the hardest battles aren't on movie sets. They're in rooms where people smile to your face while trying to pull you apart. And with that, he pulled off his mic, set it gently on the chair, and walked out. The studio was dead silent. Tamron stood frozen for a moment, her hand still resting on her desk. Finally, she exhaled slowly and looked toward the audience. Well, she said softly, I guess that's one way to end an interview. The audience didn't know whether to clap or stay silent. Later, clips of the confrontation flooded social media, some praising Samuel for standing his ground, others defending Tamron for staying composed under fire. In the end, both walked away with their reputations intact, but neither unscathed. Because what happened that day wasn't just a clash between actor and journalist. It was a collision between pride and perception, between honesty and control, between the truth we tell ourselves and the truth others demand from us. And maybe that's why people are still talking about it. Because sometimes the real drama doesn't happen in the movies. It happens when the cameras are rolling, the masks come off, and no one's acting anymore.